Strike up the band.
In this episode, we're going to talk about how sometimes it's better to just not ask and do what you need to do. Hey, just a reminder, if you need professional development or you would like to have a keynote speaker come and share about how teachers saved my life, I would love to come and share that with you. So you've heard the expression, it's better to get forgiveness rather than permission. And so I'm here to share 3 stories with you about times that worked out well for me. Now, it's not something you want to do all the time, but sometimes there are some things that you need to do that with. When I was at my second position, we had this beautiful large practice room. It was meant to be used for a combo, but it was full of choir risers. The choir teacher made the decision to store her choir risers in that shared room of ours. And so the room was pretty much useless for us to have anybody practice in. You could fit maybe 2 students, just like the other practice rooms. But normally it was meant to fit 15 students in the room. And of course, the drama teacher didn't want the risers on the stage. So there was a time, I shouldn't confess these kind of things. There was a year when the drama teacher and choir teacher both left in the same year, and I knew that if I asked permission to move those risers, somebody somewhere would have said no. So I didn't ask permission. I took the time. It took me about an hour of sweaty grunt work to move them all, but I moved it myself a couple of weeks before school started to the stage because I knew that if there was a nice clean spot on backstage for them to be stored at when the new drama teacher came in. I hope the drama teacher's not listening. Maybe they're still there. But when the new drama teacher came in, they would just assume that's where those items were stored. So that was something that was very effective for me to do, but I had to wait several years for that to happen. Another occasion, I started a marching band, and in this case, I did ask. So I started at my second assignment with a principal who was very strict and her leadership style was very hands-on, asking you for things, following up. And there was probably a need for that at that point. And when she left, she was followed by a guy who was the complete opposite of her. He was very loosey-goosey. And the great thing was, just to give you a story of the comparison between the two, if she was in your class, you were probably in trouble. So there were occasionally times she was in my class and I thought I was in trouble, but she was just there to ask me something. And someone said, well, as long as she's smiling, then you're probably safe. But there had been a lot of times where people had been let go, and sometimes they were let go in the middle of the day, or at least that's the rumors I heard. Sometimes things get blown out of proportion. And she was followed by a guy who was in my room every single day. He was in every teacher's room every day. And at first it made me nervous, but that was just his leadership style. And so when it came time to start a marching band, I asked him, he was my boss. I asked him, is it okay if I start a marching band? And he's like, James, you do whatever you think is great. You have my total support and encouragement. Let me know what I can do. He was a great principal, probably the greatest one I had. Unfortunately, he was only at our school for 1 year. He thought he wanted to go to central office, but that really robbed his soul. So he went to central office for a year, and then we already had a replacement for him. So he ended up jumping districts and finished out his career, I think, for like a decade as a principal at that school. But that's beside the point. So I did ask him for permission to start a marching band, and he gave me permission. However, about 3 or 4 years into our program, the then principal was chewing me out and said, well, you didn't do the proper procedure. And I said, how did I not do the proper procedure? I asked the principal. If he would have said, fill out this paperwork, or if he would have said, do something else, I would have done that. So they had to blame somebody, so they were blaming me because this guy was gone already. The third incident I want to talk about is kind of a silly incident. I had an oboe player, and this kid was one of those kids that he was always following the rules. He was always doing the right thing. And so I never would have thought about it. He played oboe, and he said, Mr. Devine, the school has a rule that we're not supposed to have knives. Is it okay that I have my reed knife? And so because he was concerned about it, I told him I would ask the principal about it. And I could not get an answer from the principal. It was one of the stupidest things. I explained to them, I said, this is not a knife. It's called a reed knife, but it's not really. It's more like a file, and it's used to scrape the reeds, and every single oboe player has one. I must have asked 3 or 4 times. I went in person and I just got the runaround, or I'll get back to you. And so finally the kid's asking me, and I decided to take my boldness from the Army and tell him that he was safe having his reed knife, and that if he faced any troubles, I would stand behind him 100%. But I did ask him for one concession. I said, let's not call it a reed knife. Let's just call it a reed scraper. So if anyone asks you about it, you have a reed scraper. So these are just some silly things that have come up in my career to show you that sometimes it's better not to ask. Now, once again, I want to say, don't make this a habit. Don't make it something you do all the time. But occasionally it's okay to not ask and make the decision yourself.
The Music and Podcast, where you get quick and easy tips for how to be a better band.